Welcome. You have arrived at the Maine Community Foundation Maine Women's Fund information session. In case you don't mean to be here, that's what we'll be talking about for the next 20-30 minutes. We'll go ahead, I think, and get started because it's noon. All right, so my name is Gloria Ponte, and I'm a community partner here at the Maine Community Foundation. I work with this grant program, the Maine Women's Fund, and a few other grant programs throughout the year. We'll spend the next half hour, 20 minutes so talking about the Maine Women's Fund today. And I'm also available after the presentation by email or by phone to answer any other specific questions, related to your organization and also help with the application. I'll take a moment to introduce my friend Joey, who does a lot of the grants behind the scenes work. He created the application online, etc., and is the person behind that grants email. So you probably chatted with Joey at some point. So let's take a breath together. And I want to begin our time with an acknowledgement honoring all Indigenous people, especially the Wabanaki who came here before us and nurtured this space as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people to this land. All right, so feel free to put some introductions in the chat, just your name and organization, and we'll use the Q&A button. So you can also enter any questions as I'm going along in that Q&A function, and we'll do the questions at the end. And so now I will start sharing my screen. Let's see here. And Joey, just let me know if you see that. Okay, cool. All right. So we'll start with a very brief information about the Maine Community Foundation. I'm happy to talk to you about the foundation at another time. We won't be focused on that today. But I just want to say that we do grants, which is this type of thing, competitive grants. We also offer a lot of scholarships. That's another sort of arm of the foundation for educational purposes. And we work with donors. So the donors do a lot of funding for these grant programs and other things. So those are kind of the three arms there. And we have, I think, about 14 competitive grant programs these days. So a broad overview, the Maine Women's Fund actually started at the Maine Community Foundation in 1988, thanks to the efforts of Gloria Milliken of Westport, Maine, who was a founder and board member of the New York Women's Foundation. So she wanted to see something similar in Maine. So gratitude to Gloria Milliken for starting this all. And that became its own organization up until a few years ago when the Maine Women's Fund came back to the Maine Community Foundation. At that point, we worked with the board on a transition, and we had an open call for advisors that helped develop this grant program. And the fund's purpose, which is like in the setup documents of the fund, is to make bold investments to transform the lives of women and girls. And then there's an additional fund that feeds into the Maine Women's Fund, and that's called the Karen Moran Leadership Fund. And that honors the life and work of Karen Moran. Her friends set up this fund, and she cared a lot about leadership development and developing leadership capacity of women and girls. And so that's the focus of that sub-fund. And it's focused on all races and backgrounds with a preference for BIPOC-focused organizations. And so the scope of this grant program is it'll be able to grant out about $130,000 a year, which means about 8 or so grants. And if awarded a grant, It's a 2-year grant, and so you'll receive an award check in 2025 and in 2026, and the fund will be open again for new applications in 2027. And the due date is September 15th. Oh, I'm not advancing the slides. I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness. I'll catch you up. There we go. Okay. So now we're on the criteria. So each of our grant programs has a series of criteria that's unique to each grant program. And so the Maine Women's Fund criteria are on this slide and the following slide. So the advisors want to see that the work is taking place locally. So you must be located in Maine. The focus needs to be on women and girls. So have 2 or more programs that are focused on women and girls. And the work needs to focus on communities with the most inequities. Oop, hold on. Ah, okay. So there's another, let's see, hold on. There we go. I advanced too many. So the other criteria is that your organization must focus on one of the 4 following things. And the advisors chose these areas because they saw them as the root causes of inequities. So that's either financial literacy, health education, leadership development, or policy and advocacy. So that is what the fund is going to focus on, those 4 areas. Another criteria for this fund is that you engage the community you serve. So organizations that listen and respond to those they serve will be the most helpful to the community. So this grant program and most of our grant programs have this as a criteria. Because the ideas that come from the community during the design stage and delivery and evaluation really better meets the needs of communities. And so the review community, which is the community-based advisors, will discuss this and talk about if the people you serve are involved in your work. And because advisors want to see that organizations are offering programming that the community is asking for and taking part in. So do take a look at all the eligibility criteria. And another note is that this grant program provides grants to organizations, not individuals. I've had a few questions from individual people. So I want to make that clear. We do have scholarships, like I said, if you're looking for personal assistance to attend school. Okay. So we will offer 2-year general support grants. And general support allows for flexible funding. So the organization can use the funds for whatever is most needed in that moment. So it can be for rent, for salary, for program expenses. Sometimes people will use it for emergency needs that come up, whatever the organization chooses. So general support funding also allows organizations to respond quickly to events as they happen because they're not earmarked for a specific program. The maximum award will be $15,000 per year. Again, it's a 2-year grant. So awarded in 2025, and then the second year will be awarded in 2026 after an optional phone call with an advisor or an optional written grant update. Another bonus of the general support request is that you don't need to write a budget. So there's no like program budget page or program budget narrative. And as a person who's written grants, I appreciate that. So it's just you're asking for $15,000. This photo credit is from a Maine Women's Fund grantee. It's Maine Transnet, their Safe Combinations Thrift. And a peek into how decisions are made. So we had an open call for advisors, and the advisors from this fund are of all ages, from high school to retired, and represent all corners of the state. Some really great advisors. And each of our grant programs has a group of people we call advisors that make the decisions. They read the proposals and will call the applicant to hear about the organization's work in the applicant's own words. And then when reviewing a request for general support, the advisors will focus on the mission of the organization and its ongoing programs. And very importantly, do these match up with the criteria for that particular grant program? So in this case, does the organization have at least 2 programs focusing on women and girls and in one of the 4 topic areas? And something advisors tell me is that they can really tell when a grant writer has written the application. So a tip is, if you're going to use a grant writer, to have the grant writer interview you with the application questions. So then it has more of the flavor of the work taking place. And now we will look at some application questions. So these are the actual questions that are in the application. First, you'll create an account, and a little further on, I have some pictures of the web pages. And we also have a great video and other resources online to help you set up an account. So once you're in the application, if the organization checks yes to the criteria questions, then the rest of the questions will appear. And we did this because we really only want organizations that are eligible to spend time with the application. And there are 6 questions based off the criteria. They do have word limits. So I think we set them at like 250 words for some of the questions. And so that's actually kind of big. We made them, I think, bigger than is needed. So please only use what you need. You don't have to fill it up. And here are the questions 5 and 6. So remember that women and girls are the primary recipients, and that you have 2 or more grant programs more focused on women and girls, and on one of those 4 areas. A quick note on what we can't fund. The Maine Women's Fund can't fund for-profit businesses, regranting to secondary grantees through a competitive process, individuals, political campaigns, lobbying that calls for a specific vote, or religious activities. Photo credit here is In Her Presence, their job readiness program, a previous Maine Women's Fund grantee. So all applicants will have at least one attachment, and this is just like an upload button in the application. And that is, all applicants will upload a board list. And then if you're working with a school, then we do require a letter from the principal or superintendent agreeing that they will work with your organization, because we want to see that collaboration has already been established. And for those organizations that are fiscally sponsored, because you don't have to have your own 501c3 to apply to the Maine Community Foundation, you can be a fiscally sponsored organization. Then you will upload a fiscal sponsorship form, which is just 1 page. And that is on our website. It requires a signature from the fiscal sponsor and a signature from the organization. And in order to be fiscally sponsored, the IRS, recommends that you have at least 3 unrelated board members in addition to a mission. And there are some frequently asked questions on the website that can help with that as well. And here's the timeline. So the applications will come in September 15th, and then the grant staff will review to make sure all the parts are completed and things are uploaded. If there's fiscal sponsorship, that those things are uploaded as well. And then proposal review begins by advisors and donors. So we have a program called Giving Together with donors, and it's a website, and the donors can search by grant program, by topic area, and by geographic area. And then they can make grants right from there. So if a donor does pick up a grant, we send those grant checks right then. We won't wait until the grant program closes. So then the advisors are doing the review. We have a grant decision meeting with the advisors in November. And then in December, the grant staff will process the decisions, and the decisions will be emailed. So those notifications, both awards and declines, will go through our online system, and it will come from grantproposals@mainecf.org. So if you could add this to your list of accepted addresses, then that can avoid it going to spam or junk. And if you are awarded a grant, then you'll receive a hard copy letter with the award and check. So now let's look at some of the screenshots I've got. So our website has a lot of information. So if you searched for mainecf.org, it takes you to the foundation's homepage. This is a picture of the website, and you'll want to click on grants where that red arrow is. And then when you hit on that, you'll see this web page that's competitive grants, programs, and deadlines. And so we've arranged them by due date. So you'll see we have a host, I think we have 7 or so grant programs with the September 15th due date. So you'll look for Maine Women's Fund and click on that. But this is a list of all the competitive grant programs. And this is a screenshot of the Maine Women's Fund page. And this is where the webinar will be posted, as well as the slides. And this page contains all the information I've talked about today. It'll have the criteria, for example, and the background as well. And so see that orangey salmon colored button on the upper right where the red arrow is? That's the apply button that you will take a look at. And again, we have a whole webinar based on how to set up your account. Once you press that orangey button, you'll see this page where it'll say apply here. And the video will walk you through this again. This is just a super quick overview. And you'll see this page where you'll enter your account. It actually will, you'll enter your organization's name and it will pull up the information. What's neat about this new application system is it's going to save some of your information. So you won't have to upload, enter everything all over again. If you're applying for a grant program again in February, it will remember and pull that information up. So a bunch of our grant questions now in the application are sort of like a common application, and that will just pull from application to application. And this photo credit is from a Maine Women's Fund grantee, Maine Women's Lobby Education Fund, and this is from the Girls' Day at the State House. So that's all I've got. Now we can take some questions. Let me stop sharing. All right. Okay. Okay, there's a question asking, there's a statewide program with that's in multiple schools. What would the letter requirement be? Yes. So we do that because so you will need a letter from each school that you're intended to work in, because we've seen in the past, programs that are intending to work with a school. Sometimes it can take a whole year just to make that relationship and that agreement. And sometimes you'll approach the school and the school will say no. So if your program is really focused on a school or a number of schools, the advisors will want to see that that piece of work has already taken place so that the funds will go into actually providing services and not just the development of the relationship. Okay.
Doesn't look like there are any other questions in the Q&A. Also, please feel to raise your hand if a lot of the times if the question's a little bit more complicated, it's easier just to talk it out than it is to type it out. So please feel free and raise your hand if there's anything lingering so we can unmute you and get to your question. I think we're good for now, Gloria.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. And again, all the information I shared is on the website. It is a new application program, so feel free to reach out to us for any questions. There is a video specifically on the application program, and pay attention to the criteria. And thank you for your time and look forward to hearing from you.